Welcome back once again, and ensure that you tune in tomorrow in case you're already salivating about the chop pot, because it will indeed be interesting. Now we're going into our health club this morning, and since the doctors have been on strike, private hospitals and clinics have been put through their paces and completely and utterly stretched. So at this point in time, knowing some first aid could actually save some lives. This morning we hand over to Dr. Dennis Borte, and he will go through some first aid measures that could help during this situation. We're going to start off with poisoning.
When you talk about food poisoning, you're talking about eating some food, and then you have this thing that comes with abdominal cramps, abdominal pain, sometimes vomiting and diarrhea, which will sometimes come with a fever. That basically has to do with an infected food you are eating, or you have eaten, and infected with bacteria, with other parasites, so it can give you these symptoms. In that instance, it's suggested that if you have your usual oral rehydration salt ORS at home, you would start ingest, or you have you make an ORS solution. If you have a situation where you don't have the ORS, you can have some salt and water and sugar, and that kind of make your own homemade ORS or oral rehydration for that matter, so that you can be ingesting it or drinking it to rehydrate, to keep the body water balance in good form. And then you try to head to the hospital if there's one close to you. That is food poisoning. But there are other forms of poisoning. I mean, chemical poisoning. Somebody can even have gas poisoning, and which may go through, you may have ingested, drank something, or eaten something that contains a chemical that what we call poisoning, as in somebody has poisoned you, or you have eaten something that contains poison. You can have kerosene poisoning. Children may sometimes ingest kerosene or some form of this petroleum product at home, which contain hydrocarbons for that matter. That is a cause for concern as well. Person may start having drowsiness, dizziness, and may begin to lose their consciousness. A lot of times people want to force people to vomit the poisonous thing out. That is a no-no. If the poisonous substance, be the chemical, is something that irritates the let's say your throat or your esophagus as it's going down, the idea is not to get the person to vomit it out, because it coming back will again irritate the same pathway and cause more injury. Just make sure the person is lying on their side, so that the vomiters will rather come out rather than entering another orifice, in which case it might enter into the respiratory tract or the trachea and then get into the lungs. That could be a problem. That again goes for the children who may ingest kerosene, what we call kerosene poisoning. They may have ingested the kerosene initially because it's not something that tastes nice. The children usually don't take in so much of it. They may be smelling of it, and that goes for other chemicals as well, be it petroleum, be it any other. If there's any smell of anything unusual, then you might say that, okay, this child has kerosene poisoning. If you try to let the child vomit out immediately, what you might do is that you might end up giving the child what we call aspiration. You may aspiration or chemical pneumonia. It may enter into the lungs, and then the child may have other problems. The most important thing is to make sure that you look at what we call the ABC, the airways of the child, the breathing of the child, the circulation of the child. At the same time, you are calling for help or moving towards help.
Okay, and the next first aid tips that Dr. Borte will be telling us about is how to deal with burns.
So when somebody has burns, the first thing is to take the person away from the site of the burn. Be it a gas burn, be it fire, be it chemical. One is to pull away person away from the point, and then your next point of call is water. So if you have any tap close by, just put the person under it, and then just the water pass over the site of the burn as much as possible. Do not attempt to rub over the burnt area, because you will end up peeling off the epidermis or peeling off the overlying skin, which again, when that is done, you might cover with something dirty, and you introduce some more organisms into the skin, and that would lead to skin infection. Wash over the area several times as you get to the hospital. Because if you get to the hospital with a chemical still on you, if it's a chemical pain, the first thing the doctors want to do is to wash it off. So you might as well start that from the home where you would be applying a lot of water. Most circumstances, burns go with a lot of pain. If possible, have a painkiller at home to relieve the pain. An anti-inflammatory Vaseline, for example, has a bit of a soothing effect. So for kids like that, you may want to apply a little bit of Vaseline over the side and then put some nice clean gauze over it.
Okay, so that was dealing with burns. Now we follow on with more first aid tips, and now we're talking
superficial. What we are worried about is, one, the wound that you sustain from that. We would want to have the wound not to get infected, and also another thing is to make sure that there is no a situation where you have too much hemorrhage or too much bleeding. If it's a deep cut and you are pouring a lot of blood, it will end up you and into the patient probably go into what we call hemorrhagic shock. The source of the cut may be dirty, may be infected. So first things first is soap and water to wash the wound. And if there's no bleeding, you want to cover the wound. Make sure you cover the wound with something that is clean. Make sure something, a clean cloth to cover the wound. That is very important, because if you take anything dirty around or somebody just takes anything sold into, you would have introduced more infection into the wound, and then after you getting your stitches, etc., the wound gets infected and it will gape. If there is spraying out or spurting out of blood, that means that the cut has gone into either an artery or a vein and blood is coming out. In that case, you do what we call pressure. Use the whatever you are using to cover. You tie it to give it something like a tourniquet effect, because there's bleeding coming directly. So you want to keep pressure over that portion so that the bleeding doesn't become too much, or it will stop the bleeding at least when you get to the hospital. And then the doctors look at the wound. They will be able to look for that vein that is bleeding that badly, and then hold it with their instruments, and then close that vein up.
Next, we will be dealing with fevers.
Fever has got to do with increase in your body temperature. You increase your body temperature, you feel cold, you feel warm, sometimes feeling cold and feeling warm at the same time, or alternate times, and then you'll be having rigors, your body may be shaking, and then you feel sick. Fever may be a result of anything. Fever may not necessarily be as a result of malaria. Though malaria is one of the commonest causes in our environment. But fever could be because of any other infection. Any other infection can give you a fever. It's important that whilst you are not sure what the cause of the fever is, what you can do in the interim, either wash the child down every maybe now and then, or have a sponge or your towel, cold water, and then just sponge the child gradually as you are moving towards the hospital. Another thing you could do is maybe use an antipyretic. Antipyretic as in medications that reduce temperature. They don't really solve the underlying problem, but at least it reduces the temperature. One is the commonest we have is acetaminophen or paracetamol, which people usually take when they have a fever. For adults, it's 1 gram, like 2 tablets that you can take and then head to the hospital. For the children, depending on the age and the weight, we have 125. Now we have the one they insert. It's the rectal one, which is called a suppository. They have 125 for a certain age, 250 for a certain age, and maybe 500 for a certain age. But in that case, don't assume that because the temperature has come down, the fever has gone down, you've solved the problem. So it's for you to head to the hospital, for you to be examined, maybe blood samples taken to see if it's because of an infection, or it's because of malaria, is it an ear infection, or is it a throat infection, is it an intestinal form of infection? And there, when that the doctor deciphers between what is what, and then the appropriate medications or treatment can be tailored out to the individual.
Okay, and finally we're going to be dealing with snake bites. Now, snake bites may not always be fatal. However, the way we deal with this situation is what may cause or not cause further harm. Let's take a look.
Snake bite, quite common. When somebody gets a bite, be it on the hand, be it on the legs, anything that is tight on the person, you might rather remove it. If the person has rings or watches or anything that can be tight, firstly remove it, because when the snake bites, it's likely the snake may or may not be poisonous. Because of the fang bite, the place may go through inflammation. It may swell up. Now, if the place is swelling up and there's a ring or something tied there, then it means that you even prevent blood flow from getting to that area. And eventually what you realize, that the person will come back and tell you that I feel numb in my feet, and he thinks that it is because of the snake bite. But it's because so if the part is below the heart level, just keep it there. The quickest thing to do is to wash the place with soap and water, get the person to the hospital quickly enough. What is most important is the anti-snake venom. That injection, the anti-snake that will be injected, will take care of the wound. People usually panic, and I think they cause more problems by tightening it so much that eventually blood doesn't even go to that part of the limb. If you are bitten by a snake, what we say is that don't move the leg too rigid or too roughly. Okay, so you rather keep the leg stable, because it's too much movement that will even cause the venom, if there is, to be able to have a better effect. So sometimes we say splint the leg, or put the leg, put a wooden plank, and then maybe like loosely hold it at two ends against the plank, so that the leg does not move up and down, to let the poison move, if there is venom, move to and fro as quickly as you wouldn't want it to. So keep the leg rather stable, remove rings and all these things, and then get to the hospital quickly and get your anti-snake venom. For somebody who again has been bitten by a snake, you will still have to be observing the person, whether the person is getting drowsy, the conscious level of the person, the breathing of the person, and all these things. Once you are noticing it, you are calling for help or moving towards help. And where there's a need to do what we call the CPR or the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, you do it and then give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and then get the person to the hospital.